Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Hi friends, my name is Al or Lilstarnerd. Welcome to today's video. Do you ever have days where you just feel like you look weird and different? Why do I look like this today? Logically, I know I look the same, but why do I look like a totally different person? Anyways, today I'm doing another Pinterest board character design challenge. I did the first one last month, 2 months ago. I really enjoyed it, and so did you guys, and you guys wanted a continuation, which I'm happy to do because it was so much fun. For a brief explanation, I have, based on the feedback, I might have come up with this back in the day. There was like a thing going around. I thought there was a meme, an Instagram meme going around where you make a Pinterest board for someone, they design a character off of it. But apparently no one else has done that. So I guess maybe I probably am not the inventor of this idea, but I don't know anyone else who's done it. So I guess I'll just take credit for it. Unless someone else would like to challenge me for that. I guess it's my idea. But so over on Instagram, and I think also on the community tab, I asked you guys to make a Pinterest board of about 10 to 15 pins, and I would make a character out of it. For this episode, I used the same submitted boards as last time because there were a few that I really liked, but I didn't get to. But I think this is a video concept that I will definitely be revisiting often in the future. So at some point, I'm probably gonna ask for resubmissions of Pinterest boards and keep an eye out for that. If you wanna make a board, keep an eye out on my Instagram or my community tab page where I will ask for those submissions. Just like last time, to make this video go a little bit more smoothly, I've already come up with the concepts and drawn out the sketches for these characters in my sketchbook, so we can just jump right in to the characters themselves. Without further ado, grab your sketchbook, let's sit down, let's do some art together. Let's go. The first board was made by Alex, so thank you, Alex. What a slay board. This board, and honestly, all of the boards in this video, were strong contenders for the challenge in the first character design video, but for whatever reason, didn't make it that first time. This board was one that I really loved, but it just didn't as easily spark ideas for a character compared to the ones that did make it into the first video. I think this time, now that I had that first go round under my belt, it was a bit easier for me to come up with the characters because I knew what the process was going to look like, and I knew kind of how to better prepare, so it was easier for me to pick the boards. If you're curious about what that process looks like and how I did pick the boards, I'll give you a quick explanation. Honestly, not much of it can really be put into words. When picking the boards, it was basically just which ones immediately sparked interest. If I looked at it and automatically liked it, felt drawn to it, felt like it was speaking to me, or there was a story that I could be interested in, then I set that board aside. Whereas there were some that just didn't really seem interesting to me at all, or they were a little too obvious and wouldn't be enough of a challenge, or require much actual designing or storytelling. Once I narrowed it down to a few options, I went back through the boards I liked and literally just looked at them for a few minutes. I just stared at them. My process when coming up with the characters was literally just let my imagination run wild while I stared at all the pins, and one thought would come, which would lead to another, which would lead to another, until, within a few minutes, I would have at least a half-baked character. Some boards, it was easy to find the character, and some it wasn't as easy, or I couldn't think of anything, and so then, that's how I narrowed it down to the 4 characters that I went with today. This board spoke to me right away with the dark and moody vibes, the woodland creature imagery. I loved it a lot, but it did take a few minutes for me to actually find a character from the board. I think this character is one that really did stray from the original source material, not necessarily by a lot, but once I had the idea in my head, I went more off that than I did the pins, So looking back now, I can definitely see the jumping off points and the elements that I specifically pulled, but there's a lot that was left behind or lost in translation, even just the moody and dark atmosphere and the coloring of the board. But I do think a lot of those lost and left behind elements end up in the character's storyline or world, so it all kind of ties in eventually. So let me start with this character's story, because that will explain some of the design choices. I see this character as a very minor goddess that has taken up residence in a forest that sits between, a few different towns, sometime and somewhere in medieval Europe, or at least some fantasy version of it. She has no real responsibilities or unique gifts, but does enjoy making herself a nuisance. She was kicked out of her original godly home for being a pest, basically, and she went to this forest for whatever reason. I don't really care about the backstory. Maybe it's a place she's always visited and liked. Maybe a friend lived there. Maybe she traveled and wandered for a while until she settled there. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. But she liked the forest, and while she's not really the goddess of the forest in any which way, she does love it and take pride in it and offers it protection where and when she can. She adorns herself in bits of the forest, hence the grass and vines and flowers in her hair and around her legs. She frolics with the animals, which absolutely take on a magical quality in her presence. This is specifically inspired by one of the pins of two bears seemingly dancing together in like a little field, and I just loved that idea and the energy of that pin, and I wanted that to be here for sure. So, she's super friendly and loving and has a good heart, but she definitely has a trickster spirit. She likes to play tricks on the neighboring towns and their people, sending animals to scare them, messing with their crops, stealing their things, minor things that she might see as harmless and silly, but definitely have an impact on the towns. Maybe as a goddess, she kind of sees it all as trivial, whereas she might actually be like decimating or starving a town, and she doesn't really register that. As a result, the townspeople start suspecting that there might be a witch wreaking havoc on them, and word starts to spread that it's not just each individual village, but quite a few of them, and they start to get really scared. They start turning on the women of the villages, accusing them of witchcraft, hunting them down, hurting them, and it's clear that it's going to escalate to killing very quickly. So the women now start panicking, and this goddess sees the chaos that she's created, and she loves it, until she sees a woman set to be burnt at the stake. At first she's like, oh my god, what a fun party, this is so cool, I wonder what's going on. And then they set all the sticks on fire, and she's like, whoa, not so fun anymore. And somehow, I'm not sure how, but I think in some way of manipulating the forest. There's another pin on the board of a set of stones across a body of water. It's very beautiful. And I can totally picture that slowly emerging from the forest. So okay, my point is the goddess starts basically calling these women to her. Imagine a young woman or girl being chased out by a couple angry men. She runs to the woods where she can take cover. She hides, the men pass by, still searching for her. And as she sits there, catching her breath, waiting for the coast to be clear, the trees and bushes make way to reveal a set of stones rising up from this little river or creek for her to walk across. That's basically how I would imagine the goddess is calling to these women, is the forest kind of manifesting a path for them. So, she invites these women into the heart of the forest where she essentially offers them protection and a home, and she really doesn't ask for anything in return. I think she would enjoy the chaos of it all enough that she's not really looking for anything specific. She just likes the company and the attention and being able to throw parties and watch these women go crazy. And of course, she gets to watch the men in the towns go crazy as they literally go insane. They're in a frenzy, hunting the women down and basically destroying their own towns with their stupidity. But the women feel they owe the goddess something, despite their situation literally being her fault. But maybe they haven't pieced it together, or as a goddess, they're a bit blinded by that or something. So they still want to worship her in some way or devote themselves to her. And since they're already accused of being witches, they basically take up some version of witchcraft under her watch, because why not, and become forest witches. It's very much giving the maenads of Bacchus, the total frenzied, crazy woman cannibals, I love that vibe, I love that story, and that's what I want for this wonderful lady. Now let's get into a bit more of the design. There's not a whole lot going on, honestly. She looks like she has blonde hair. I was trying to give her white, kind of glowing hair, but I can only do so much with markers. There were a few pins featuring angel wings. There were a few pins featuring angel wings or women with wings, and so I knew I had to include those. Although I picture these as more owl wings, because of another pin board. We'll get into that later though. That's obviously not relevant right now. Plus, I think that gives her a bit more of a connection to the forest. I didn't want her to be an angel. She wears a simple, very revealing draped gown because, she lives in a forest. Who's she trying to impress? She's playing a flute here. That was actually one of the starting points for me working out the character design in my head based off one pin of a fawn playing the flute, and I just really liked that. Maybe she uses it to enchant people or to get the animals to dance and walk on their hind legs and yada yada. But yeah, she has a super simple design, and I don't know if I love that for her. I think maybe I would prefer her to look super chaotic to represent how much of a trickster she is, how much she's got going on. But I don't know. Either way, I love how the drawing turned out. The second board comes from Mads, Slay Mads. Again, one I immediately loved when I did the first challenge, but wasn't immediately sure what to do with it. You all know I love a lady knight. Like, who doesn't? You know, it's the main four, right? Cowboys, vampires, pirates, and knights. A good gay has to have them all. Anyways, the preliminary sketch I did for this, I actually love so much. I struggled a bit with the pose of this one. I wanted to find a good reference photo because I've definitely learned that the difference between me drawing good, stylized characters that I actually like and drawing weird nonsense I hate is finding the right kind of reference. So I needed to like make or find the right photo, but I also really wanted to keep the same vibe as that initial sketch because I loved it so much. And starting with those restraints like that right off the bat, it can sometimes be good to kind of point you in the right direction, but sometimes it does make things a bit more difficult. So it took me a while to get the sketch quite right, and even after I settled on a sketch, I still wasn't thrilled with it. But at that point, I had already super overworked the sketch and over-erased the paper, and I just had to go with it. Obviously, this character had to be a knight, because duh, that's what the board is. And I loved the fantasy mystical element to it. As I was coming up with the character and story, you know, I was letting it come to me, let it all happen in my head, and I was like, oh my god, this character could totally, absolutely be in the same world as the goddess. In my first character design video, quite a few people mentioned in the comments that the space cowboy and the android escort, and maybe even the fortune teller, like all three of them, could be in the same world. And I loved that idea. It wasn't something I was even seeing as an option when starting the challenge because, you know, I was really focused on just like coming up with decent characters. I was at square one, y'all were at square 10. Even their stories like weren't the first thought. Those just kind of came naturally as I tried to figure out what the character would need to look like. I definitely wasn't thinking like long-term or super in-depth with the characters or how to ground them or who else was in that world or how they could possibly exist together. But once people pointed it out, I was so in love with that idea. I didn't purposely go into this challenge with the idea of putting any characters into the same world, but it was definitely in my mind as a possibility, whereas before like it hadn't been. So when I realized like this is a medieval knight and oh yeah, the goddess is in some medieval time, like yeah, let's put them together. But then it developed from just them like being in the same world or time. I knew I wanted a knight, but I wasn't sure what was going to make her special or, you know, like a character, right? Like a character that requires designing. I loved the animals featured in the Pinterest board and knew I wanted to integrate them, not just into the story as an afterthought, but into the design purposely, but I had no idea how. I also really loved the rabbit imagery on the board. Like, I think we have Alice, like I think that's Alice, holding the rabbit as one of the pins. It's one of the first pins. And I, like that one specifically, like really spoke to me. I've been really into rabbit imagery lately. I love the horror genre and I've noticed there's definitely like a theme with rabbits and I'm very into that. I love me a good theme. I love it carrying over through multiple genres and areas of my life. So I knew I wanted to include the rabbit somehow. And joining her story with the goddess really helped to bring all of that together. So here's a quick rundown of her story. This is a knight of some minor noble origin. She's not like super wealthy or has a lot of power or specific lineage or anything, but definitely wasn't like a peasant or poor or specifically on a quest to prove herself or anything. You know what I mean? I don't know, maybe she was like posted up in someone's court as a personal guard or something. It doesn't really matter. At one point, she was cursed, and I haven't decided like why that would have happened yet or how, because truthfully, I don't want to give her any sort of shitty personality background. Like I wouldn't want to do the obvious, you know, she was rude to a witch disguised as a helpless old lady. You know what I mean? So I don't know why she was cursed, but she was cursed to face the consequences of her actions. Every beast, or maybe, you know what, maybe the obvious is that like she accidentally killed the pet of a local nearby witch or something. I think that's probably the way to go. So every beast or man that she kills, she was forced to drag their body or carcass or some piece of them forever. I'd imagine there would be a lot more than just what I drew in with her here. Like I'm picturing, you know, a very large heavy sack filled with, you know, bones or body parts that a mule drags behind him or something. You know what I mean? It's not just a few animals. She's had to kill a few guys. She has to hunt to eat. She's been cursed for a while and the bodies have piled up, and so over time she's done everything she can to avoid killing anyone or anything. She basically starves herself to avoid killing any animals while traveling, and she's abandoned her sword to keep herself from harming any humans, even if it means being defenseless. In this drawing, she's got, I don't know, like a deer skull. It's really poorly drawn. It's just an antler. And then an owl wing is poking out of her sack. There's an owl pin and I really liked it, and that's the the wings of the goddess, obviously. I thought that would be like one of the goddesses, like friends, messengers, this owl, I don't know. She likes the owl. And the knight had to kill it while passing through her forest. And that's how her story kind of intertwines with the goddess, which happens while the knight is years into her journey of finding a way to break the curse or have it lifted. One of the goddess's witches would find the knight like crying over the killed owl or the killed rabbit or something, and would lead her to the goddess where the knight would plead her case. But the goddess is definitely not just going to like fix the problem, because she's gonna be difficult. So I don't know, maybe she invites the knight to like stay with her witches for a bit, let them feed her so she doesn't have to kill anything. And then the knight like goes through a healing journey, falls in love with the goddess, obviously, duh. And like fuck it, her curse eventually breaks or the goddess fixes it. I don't know. I'm not concerned with the details right now. So that's her story. As for her design, I think most of it is explained as like, she's a knight. The cape and the tattered skirt thing are mainly just for vibes, the aesthetics, just to add more design elements than just basic armor. I'm sure there's some purpose or reason for them throughout her journeys, throughout her travel, whatever. One of the things I struggled with throughout all these character designs was like the extra stuff. I don't really know how to put it or like what to call it, but I didn't want her to just look like a knight. I didn't want it all to just be armor, especially because, doing traditional, it's a lot harder to get all that detail in. It's not like I can just zoom in and go ham with detail in the armor to make that unique in a character, in a design element, So I kind of have to focus on bigger elements to make these characters feel like characters rather than just NPCs, bland people. But yeah, that's really hard for me for some reason. I mean, obviously all of character design is hard for me. That's why I'm doing these challenges to get better at it. A lot of the boards that were submitted for the last video, that didn't particularly speak to me for these challenges are boards that are just like a person. They're just like a normal modern person, like a girl in a coffee shop, a dark academia person in a school type vibe, a cottagecore vibe. And I love all of that stuff. They're great. I like the boards, but at the end of the day, like that's just a person, Even with my own characters, like I have those characters that I've talked about and they're just like college students. I mean, they were high school students, but they're like just students and they're just normal people in a normal world. I find it really hard to make an interesting design and illustration out of them, because it's like, okay, they just wear normal clothes and they look like normal people. They don't have distinguishing characteristics or interesting things going on with them that requires design elements. I think that's why having the story behind the character is so important for me and for this process, because it means I can add in design elements or props or something that adds personality where I can't manually do that. If that makes sense. But yeah, I still am really happy with the knight, even though I struggled with her a bit. I really like how she came out. Before we continue, let's take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. I'm sure by now you know who Squarespace is, but in case you don't, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that allows entrepreneurs, creatives, freelancers, business owners, etc. to create beautiful websites and platforms to represent themselves. No matter what you need, Squarespace has you covered, whether you're looking to create a portfolio, a shop, or maybe you just want all of your stuff in one place. As an artist, that's definitely my goal. I really want to work on creating a better portfolio. I want my shop there. I would love membership access stuff there. So I'm still working on I'm so indecisive. I'm still working on my website because there's so many wonderful options to choose from with Squarespace. And it's so easy to make your website. I literally don't feel bad about starting over 1,000 times because it's so easy to do. When designing your website, Squarespace has a bunch of templates that you can choose from. No matter what your website is for or what your career is, there is a template designed for you. But of course, you don't have to stick with that strict template. They're all customizable to fit your unique needs. Squarespace also utilizes Fluid Engine, which is a built-in next-generation website design system for Squarespace. So it's never been easier for you to unlock unbreakable creativity. You can start with one of those templates and then customize it to the extreme with drag and drop. So you can add in all sorts of features like buttons, links, photos, text boxes, and more, so you can completely customize it. And of course, you can also sell your products on an online store. Whether it's physical goods, digital goods, or some sort of service, Squarespace has you covered. All of the tools you need to start selling online are there through Squarespace. If you want to get started creating your own beautiful website, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lilstarnerd to save 10% off your first purchase of a domain or website. Thanks so much to Squarespace for sponsoring. Let's get back into the character designing. The third board was submitted by Jam. Thank you so much, Jam. Another board that I fell in love with at first sight. I think all of these I loved at first sight. Such a striking color palette. It immediately evokes a very specific and powerful emotion. And as a love of the femme fatale trope or genre, I was obsessed. This one didn't make the cut first round because, again, while it was clear kind of what this character was, it wasn't clear who this character was or how to design her beyond red and cool and deadly. You know what I mean? Like, a story wasn't coming to mind besides the obvious femme fatale. That was definitely still true for this round. It was still challenging. I think this character is a bit on the weaker side in terms of design and definitely in terms of story. For once, instead of this character coming to me story first, like generally the bulk of these characters come from figuring out the story and then like, okay, what would they look like considering their life? This character just visually was so clear to me without needing a story at all. I think probably because the story is somewhat like built in, right? Like maybe not her origin story or her as a person, but like where she's at in her life currently is obvious. So let's discuss the design first because it's pretty straightforward. I mean, honestly, there's not even much design. She's got this really slicked back hair. I really love that concept for her and definitely knew that was something I wanted to keep from the concept sketch. I don't know how well I executed it in the final illustration, but for some reason, I find the super greasy, slicked back, wet look perfect for her. Like, it's somewhat practical to keep her hair out of her face. It gives her a bit of an androgynous look, which I love, and I think it can also be like chic and elegant when she has to dress up. Not that she always wears her hair that way, but you know what I mean. She's got these heart-shaped sunglasses on her head. I don't think that there are specifically heart-shaped sunglasses in the board, but there was at least one pin with sunglasses and at least one pin with a heart motif, and I just really thought it made a lot of sense. Then she's got a very pretty but very like skanky red dress, lots of side boob, open back, high slit, short skirt. She's got her long black nails and high black pumps, and I think I originally designed her with a holster on her thigh for either like a gun or a knife or something, but I forgot to add that. But also, honestly, with this dress, I don't think it would have been very discreet, so probably good it's not included. So, you know, her design is like a little boring. I feel like the board definitely has some cool pins that allow for some pushing of boundaries. Like, I think it definitely would have been possible for me to add some really cool twists or features to the design to make it a bit more elevated. I, for the life of me, couldn't and still can't think of what any of those could be. Again, I'm not super great at this, which is the whole point of me doing the exercise. As for the world she's in or the life she's leading, I think it would be very sex-filled. The board really strikes me not as necessarily sexy, but like sex is happening. You know what I mean? I want to say she's more like a mercenary than anything. She's for hire, like a bit of Black Widow vibes with being really good at hand-to-hand combat, but maybe she can also do a bit of like sharpshooting and whatnot. Her approach for most of her jobs would be via honeypot. Maybe she can also be like a bodyguard for hire. Her cover is as a date, and I also think she just like terrorizes and robs men blind for fun. Like, she could totally post up at like a casino or something and take advantage of drunk men and their wallets, right? But as for overall personality, plot, motivations, I frankly have no idea. While I actually do love the board and even the final design of the character, I currently don't feel too much connection to her, which I think is an unhappy consequence of her not coming from a story first when conceptualizing her, if that makes sense. Like, if she had come from a story while I was designing her, I'm sure I would feel a lot more attached to her like I do with the other characters. Again, it's not that I dislike her. I love her, right? Like, she's a femme fatale. I love femme fatale. I support women's wrongs. I think she's hot and badass. But, you know, I look at her and I don't know anything about her, and that's hard to get attached to, you know? Either way, I think it's a great board. Honestly, okay, so realistically, I probably won't do this knowing me, but I think it would be cool to revisit this board in particular, like way down the line after I've gotten some practice at this under my belt. I think it's a board with great potential, and I think this time I did the bare minimum, like obvious answer. It would be cool to see in like half a year, 2 years, whatever, what would I be able to come up with? How would it be different? Would I be able to add those cool and different elements? Would I be able to give her a story? Or would I just draw another obvious femme fatale? This last board came from Quinone. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. This board drew me in right away with the gorgeous color palette. This board had a great balance of giving me a lot of the informational building blocks to the character, what she looks like, what she wears, stuff like that. But what I liked best were the pins that were seemingly just color palettes, like the reflections on the water and what I'm guessing are stones. Something about that being provided was so fun and cool. And of course, I just love the color palette itself. Like, I rarely work with that color palette in my art, but in real life, it's definitely a go-to. Like for decor and stuff, I love those burnt oranges and mustard yellows and sepias and dark greens and blues. I love it. So I was really drawn to this board, but it was another one that the character just didn't immediately jump out at me. She felt magical and beautiful and connected to nature, but it really wasn't clear to me in what way, because she also felt like some granola girl at a coffee shop, right? So it took a bit of thinking and zoning out and letting my brain churn for a bit. And honestly, if I hadn't already figured out our first character, the goddess, I probably wouldn't have been able to come up with anything for this board at all. But I had the idea of goddesses in mind, and that's what saved me. Obviously, this character is way too modern feeling to be like some ancient goddess or a medieval nymph or something. But I actually love the idea of like a modern goddess, a modern magical woman. Although she's not actually a goddess, I guess the best term for her would be like a dryad, although she's not like necessarily a Greek spirit or anything. It's a generic brand. But basically, she's a protective spirit of a large, dense forest and everything in it, the animals, the river, etc. And her current story takes place in modern times when a small city has basically taken over her forest and polluted her waters. But instead of being bitter or weakened, she immerses herself into the city and works to create a balance between herself and the humans and their industrialization. I think she would probably have a bit of a fascination with humans and their culture and their way of doing things and dressing. She would love making friends with the humans and basically trying to integrate them into a nature-loving cult until she can convince the whole city to take better care of her home. So when designing her, I was basically thinking about like, what would a forest spirit look like if she was in the middle of a city? And of course, I referenced the Pinterest board because I think that really is what the board feels like. So her outfit is basically taken from the board. It's like a ripoff. She loves color and patterns and lots of, fun stuff, jewelry. And of course, she would be really into activism, so her jacket would be covered in pins. She herself is covered in nature-themed tattoos, lots of jewelry she's collected or maybe even like made from the forest. She always goes barefoot to connect with her forest and the world. I think the only special element to her design though, and I forgot about it while coloring, so it doesn't even really look like anything special. I did it wrong. I love the idea of her hair kind of turning into water at the end to represent the river. And I mean, even if I had remembered, I think it would be really hard to draw it. I don't think it would have, I probably would have looked the same no matter what. But like I picture like normal hair, and then it turns into maybe like really like dripping wet hair, and then at the end it's like water, but as hair. Are you guys following me? I don't know. I added blue ends to her hair. That's it. I think overall this is my least favorite, which is a shame because I do love the board. I don't dislike the illustration, but it feels a bit knockoff to me. Like while I was coloring, I felt like there were 5 other characters I was trying to avoid her looking like. Miss Frizzle definitely being number 1. She feels disconnected and like incongruous, ambiguous. I really don't like a lot of my color choices. I don't know. It feels like because this was the last one, I was kind of just throwing stuff down, trying to make it look different from the rest, like not use the same color palette over and over. And therefore it feels a little bit more like lazy and less put together. All right, friends, we're done. Hey, I'm glad I was able to get 4 characters in, because last time I stopped at 3. I just like kind of hit a roadblock, but I'm really, really happy with these. I particularly love the goddess and the knight. Like, if I'm not super lazy and terrible, that might be reoccurring characters, who knows? The second 2 are definitely like weaker. I don't like them as much, but I still like the illustrations. I like the spread, I like the illustrations, and I had a lot of fun doing them. Character design is something that I've struggled with for a really long time. There's all sorts of different like prompt generators for character design, kind of coming from different perspectives. So like some gives you like a breakdown of the character description, some give you like a story, you know what I mean? There's all sorts of different ways for these character prompt generator things, and none of them have ever worked for me. And so I was like, whatever, I guess I'll just never be able to design, characters. So stumbling across this method and having it work so well is just so nice. And it's definitely something that I'm going to continue doing, because I feel like it's really working. It's really helping me at least be more creative and have fun. And it's fun, I like it. I feel like I can barely keep my eyes open. I'm so tired. Yeah, that's it. That's kind of the video. Let me know which character is your favorite. Let me know if you want me to keep doing these videos. I'm going to anyways. But let me know. I also saw some people being like, oh, where can I find boards like this in the last video? And I literally asked people to make me these boards, so I don't know if this is a thing that you can find. Ask your friends to make you some. I feel like I'm just talking to talk. I'm gonna go. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, the whole shebang, you know what to do. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check them out in the link in the description. Have a wonderful day. Go eat a snack, make a Pinterest board, and go do smart. Bye. Talk to you later.